So book 14 has so much to meditate upon. And we really have together here in one book the great themes that he's treating throughout the whole work. And here we have that clear statement at the end of book 14 about the two loves that make the two cities. And so we want to talk about why it is that in a discussion about the effects of the fall, he's going to be talking about the grand structure of the work as a whole. So what he starts with is the distinction between living according to the flesh or living according to the spirit. So there's two main parts to book 14. This meditation that he starts off with about flesh and spirit, and then he pivots to the fall of Adam and Eve and the effects that that has on the human constitution. All right, so life according to the flesh, Augustine is very, very concerned to make clear that when we see that in Corinthians, for instance, that it's a bad thing to walk according to the flesh. It is not a way of putting down the body. We've seen Augustine throughout this work advance a metaphysics of creation that is completely committed to a non-dualist account. There's one good creator God, and everything that he creates is good. All of being is good. That's against the Manichees, who have two warring principles, good and evil. It's even against the Platonists, who are not dualists in that sense. They are softer dualists who find in the body not something that's evil, but something that induces us to evil and that causes us great grief. So that our goal as humans is to get away from the body. Both the harder and softer forms of dualism, Augustine has argued against repeatedly. And so when he finds that phrase from St. Paul, living according to the flesh, as something bad, he's going to make clear, and he's correct in reading St. Paul this way, but that's not a condemnation of the body as such. What does it mean to live according to the flesh? So Augustine goes into a very rich exegetical consideration of how these terms are used in Scripture, flesh and spirit. And he says that the flesh is something that is taken to mean, is a synecdoche, basically, a part to take for the whole human. And that's how he's going to end up parsing this. So there are two cities. He starts off this book talking about the two cities. He says that after the fall, the kingdom of death held sway over us. And then, so no matter how many nations there are, no matter how many cultures there are, no matter how many ethnicities, peoples there are only two cities. And those cities are going to be distinguished with regard to how we stand in relation to the principle of life and the ultimate fate of death. And here he says the earthly city is made up of humans who live according to the flesh, and the city of God is made up of humans who live according to the spirit. After his exegetical consideration, we find that what it means to live according to the flesh is to live according to man. That is, to take man as the measure, to be our own boss, to be in control of our own lives. So it's either to live according to the self or to live according to man. And that's a very interesting way to put it. So flesh is not the body. Flesh is perversion. It is we are humans. We're meant to always look to God and get our direction from God. When we turn that directionality away from God towards our own selves to make and take no longer God as our measure, but to take ourselves as the measure, then what we have is living according to the flesh. So on this account, Epicureans and Stoics alike, even though one values bodily pleasure or values pleasure, the Stoics value what seem like as if they're simply mental virtues. For Augustine, because these philosophers all want to set the standard of reality according to their own lights, then they are both walking according to the flesh. It's that sense of who defines us that distinguishes the two cities. So he says that, and then he pivots when he talks about this at the end of chapter 3 in book 14. And he says, we know the devil, he proves, of course, that sin doesn't come from the body because he has no body. And here we get that indication that I foreshadowed last time. It is the devil who secretly tempts and incites us to such sins. He is supremely proud and envious. So the worst sins, according to Augustine, pride and envy, they don't require a body at all. In fact, they began in a creature that doesn't have a body. So he takes that fact of the tempter, the adversary, the one who envies humanity, its unfallen purity, and he puts the devil into the story. That's in the second part of this book 14. But what we have right now is this pivoting from life according to the flesh, which is to be a citizen of the earthly city, equaling living according to oneself or according to man, and one understands not God, then that is to live according to a lie told by the devil first, the father of lies, as he says at the end of chapter 3. And then he then spins this out to talk about how it is that living in the earthly city is the ultimate frustration. Every human wants to be happy, but it's not possible for us to be happy in this world. We've got an account already from Augustine, and he spins that out at the end of this book about how it is that in the Garden of Eden, we wouldn't have been subject to want or disease or death. So the effects of time or temporality, the wearing effects, the destructive effects of this world on our persons wouldn't have been operative in the pre-lapsarian, the state before the fall. So he's got that poignant pathos again, right? We all want to be happy. Every human desires the same thing, to be happy, and none of us can be happy in the condition of fallenness. And so that disjunct he calls a lie. That is, he says, we commit the falsehood in our way of thinking when we're earthly, when we're acting as citizens of the earthly city, walking according to the flesh. Our thinking goes like this: I'm going to commit sin so that life will go well for me. But in fact, committing sin means that life goes very badly for me. So the sin of the first parents and then our own sins, it goes into this way of corrupting the life of the world and time. And so we've got that lie, the falsehood of every time we think, oh, I'm going to take this step that is in my power, that is according to my understanding of things, and I'm going to assert myself in the world without reference to reality or God, because I want to be happy. In fact, that's the way that guarantees that I won't be happy. So everybody, as a citizen of the earthly city, is acting in a way that's completely existentially irrational, always wanting to be happy and always doing the thing that will make us unhappy. So, and so that's a very powerful account. He then spins that out to talk about emotions. And here, I just want to note, because we'll do this in discussion, but he's making a pivot from life according to the flesh, which is life according to our own standard, just taking man as the measure, the Protagorean, the sophist kind of man as the measuring rod. And then we would expect, well, Augustine is going to ultimately say, as he does at the end of this book, and gives us that famous account, right? Two loves made two cities. So all of this leads to that definition. One, the earthly city comes from the love of self, even to the contempt of God, and the city of God arises from a love of God, even to the contempt of self. In between, he goes from this discussion of flesh as being man as such to recognizing that the man himself, human beings, are what or who are we? We are what we love. And that's why the will, which is not the standard scholastic account, the will is somehow for Augustine the summation of the human person. And so when he talks about emotions, he's going to make that very clear. Emotions for Augustine, and again, this isn't the scholastic anthropology, the emotions for Augustine are the will operating in different modes, right? Desire, joy, fear, grief, depending on whether the thing we want is present to us or whether there's something that we don't want that's coming at us, right? So desire, joy, grief, and fear. And so will for Augustine always, you go slide right into love. To have a will is to be in love with something. And so he's going to say our emotions are good when our loving is good. It's in accord with reality. We love what is the right order of things, and we love the things within that order according to that order. Okay, so that's how he is getting us along towards that definition with which really is the most decisive definition of the two cities that we get in the whole work. Okay, and I'll just say a little bit about the second part of this book 14 is about the effects of the fall, and he's going to spend a lot of time on sexual desire as being paradigmatic of our, when God punished humanity for choosing to follow its own measure. So here's the great falsehood, right? I want to be in control. So God puts us, says, okay, gives us into our own hands, into our own power. And then we find we've lost control of everything. And for Augustine, this is most obvious in the case of sexual desire. And there he's talking about things like erections. He's saying this is a sign that our body is no longer under the rule of reason and our will. And so when we had wanted to be master of the world, what we found is we're no longer even master of ourselves or our own bodies. And that is, interestingly enough, for Augustine, why we treat sexual acts, even admittedly lawful sexual acts, as something to be hidden. For him, it's not nudity or anything like that. That's an interesting, different kind of cultural mindset he's got. He's saying what we find most shameful about our sexual desire is that it means that we are aroused when we don't want to be, and when we want to be, we're not always aroused. And so it epitomizes the fact that after the fall, we've lost control of everything.